My name is Lena and I'm 31 years old. If someone asked me whether I ever had big dreams in life, the answer would be yes. I used to want to be a fashion designer, someone who could craft beauty and make the entire room fall silent to admire every detail. But reality quickly woke me up. After graduating, I started working as a marketing specialist at a small tech company in Atlanta, Georgia. It wasn't my dream job, but at least it was stable and helped me pay off my loans. I met Owen at an industry dinner. He was a close friend of hers and we were paired up for a celebrity guessing game. He had an easy laugh, a charming way of speaking, and, most importantly, he understood the dream I had set aside. Turns out Owen had also once pursued the arts. He had been part of a dance crew throughout college but eventually chose a business path to meet his family's expectations. We started dating just a few weeks after that party. My mom kept asking when I would finally settle down and when she'd have a grandchild to hold. And even though I wasn't entirely ready for marriage, I softened. Owen doted on me, at least in the beginning. Outdoor dinners, surprise gifts, like new headphones because he knew I still loved to hum while doing chores. Everything felt like a dream. A year later we got married, and I decided to quit my job at the bank to focus fully on our family. Owen worked for a large investment fund, had a decent income, and told me I deserved time to rest after all those busy years. But it wasn't long after the wedding that I began to understand more about his family. Owen had a younger half-sister, named Tessa, 3 years younger than us. His family always said Tessa had suffered nerve damage after a serious fever when she was 12. Since then, they said she couldn't speak or walk anymore. At first, I thought that was heartbreaking. A young woman bound to a bed and wheelchair for life. But strangely, Tessa didn't seem as sorrowful as I had imagined. Though she couldn't speak, she communicated through drawings and a letterboard. I was hesitant at first, but I learned to understand Tessa through her eyes, her smile, and her gentle gestures. I remember once sitting with Tessa on the back porch. I pointed to the sky and drew a musical note in the air. Tessa smiled and drew a heart. I laughed and signed back, "You understand me?" She nodded, her eyes sparkling like we had just shared a secret. If Tessa was a gentle light, then my mother-in-law, Mrs. May, was a quiet storm. She always looked at me with a calculating gaze, as if I were a product still within the return window. Every time I stepped into her house, I felt like I was taking a surprise test. "Don't leave Owen's shoes lying around like that. He looks like someone with no job," she'd say with disapproval. "If your husband looks like that, who's going to respect his wife?" I'd force a smile and quickly place the shoes back into the closet. Everything in that house had to be arranged a certain way. Towels folded left to right, laundry hung by color order. I was no stranger to perfectionism, but the way Mrs. May carried it out always made me feel small. To her, Owen was still little Owen, and I, though legally his wife, was an outsider to the family. After the wedding, we lived in a small apartment just about a 20-minute drive from Owen's parents' home. And somehow, Mrs. May always knew exactly when I was home alone. She would call, or worse, show up, unannounced, carrying a bag of groceries and a list of suggestions, as if I were a new housekeeper. I once thought marriage meant having a peaceful home, but gradually I realized I had entered a family with an invisible hierarchy, where every word was weighed to please the head of the house and my sacrifices were treated as expected duties. And I never would have guessed that Tessa, the one seen as helpless and silent, would be the person who changed my life forever. I don't remember exactly when things began to shift. Maybe it was a few months after our first anniversary when Owen no longer smiled as I handed him his morning coffee, or when he stopped texting to ask if I'd had lunch. The little things that once made me feel loved suddenly disappeared. Owen started coming home late more often, blaming long meetings or saying the boss needed me to stay and review documents. On those nights, I'd eat dinner alone, staring at my cold plate, and convincing myself he was just busy with work. But over time, the distance between us grew more obvious. When I asked questions, he avoided them. When I asked to ground, stayed silent. He didn't reach out. As Owen became more distant, I found myself growing closer to Tessa. I visited her often, and although at first my mother-in-law disapproved, I didn't care. Every time I came by, Tessa would be waiting by the window, her sketch pad ready. She drew little houses, cats wearing hats, kites flying in the sky. In her art, I saw her spirit, vibrant, intelligent, and far more perceptive than anyone in the family gave her credit for. I started fall and 4Ps, teaching myself sign language in the evenings after Owen was asleep or working on his computer. At first, I only learned basic signs like hello and thank you, but soon, I understood more. It wasn't just a language, it was a bridge between me and Tessa. Whenever we talked, with our hands, it felt like we were escaping a cold world where my mother-in-law's sharp words still echoed in my ears. I don't understand why Owen chose someone like you, Mrs. May said one evening when I had just helped Tessa tidy her room. Tessa might like you, but that doesn't mean I have to. I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew with Mrs. May, silence was the clearest form of resistance. Every word she uttered felt like an attempt to correct me. And Owen, he neither defended me nor disagreed with his mother. Every time I mentioned her cutting remarks, he would shrug. That's just how Mom is. Get used to it. Eventually, I stopped telling him, and he stopped asking. One early fall evening with leaves, just starting to turn gold, I went to Owen's parents' house with a tray of homemade pumpkin bars. Tessa loved pumpkin bars, and I wanted to surprise her. But as I stepped inside, I saw Owen, sitting in the living room with his mom, both laughing. Something I hadn't seen him do around me in a long time. You're here tonight? Owen asked, not sounding the least bit happy. I made these for Tessa, I replied, gently, setting the tray on the table. You didn't mention you'd be here. No need to mention it, my mother-in-law cut in, her eyes cold. Family can come by, anytime. It sounded warm, but I knew it wasn't meant for me. I walked over to Tessa. She was sitting by the window as always, but this time without her sketch pad, just hugging a blue pillow, tightly. She looked at me, blinking slowly as if to ask, "Are you okay?" I forced a smile and signed, "I'm fine." But at that moment I realized my hands were trembling. That night, when we had got back home, Owen barely said a word. I took off my coat, hung it up, then turned to him and asked, "Is there something you're not telling me?" He flinched. "What kind of question is that?" I don't know. I just feel like you're not really here anymore. Not fully. He sighed, staring at the paneled floor for a while before saying, "It's just work. Don't overthink it." There it was again. Don't overthink. I said nothing more, but I knew my instincts weren't wrong. Something was happening in this family, and I, once someone he cherished, now felt like an outsider in my own marriage. Tessa was the only light left, but what I didn't know yet was that her light would be the one to reveal all the secrets Owen and his family had been hiding for so long. About 3 weeks later, on a quiet weekend morning, I was making breakfast when Owen walked into the bright kitchen looking uneasy. He set his phone down on the dining table and gave me a cautious look, like he was about to say something important. "Lena, do you have any plans for next week?" he asked with a hesitant tone. I stopped what I was doing and turned to look at him. Lately, Owen rarely asked about my schedule. My heart started to beat a little faster. I don't have anything planned. Why? Owen hesitated for a moment before continuing. My family just decided to take a trip to Santorini, Greece. My parents and me too. I was surprised and for a second even a little excited. Santorini? Wasn't that the place we had once planned to visit for our second anniversary? But that brief moment of excitement quickly faded when I saw Owen's expression. He didn't look like he intended to invite me along. "So, what about me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though the sting of being left out had already begun to rise. Owen stared down at the table, avoiding my eyes. "Lena, this time it's just a family trip. Actually, there's something I want to ask you." A wave of unease washed over me. I took a deep breath to steady myself. "What is it you want me to do?" He paused, then said, "My family would like to ask you to stay home and take care of Tessa while we're gone." I froze, disappointment crashing over me. I had sensed the growing distance lately, but I never imagined Owen would exclude me this blatantly. "Take care of Tessa," I repeated, disbelief clear in my voice. Why not bring her along? Owen sighed. Mom said it would be too difficult for Tessa to travel that far. Plus she thinks you're the best person to care for her. You're close to Tessa, right? He said that last part, carefully, as if trying to back me into a corner, make it impossible to say no in front of his mom. And right then, the doorbell rang. I hadn't even moved yet when Owen walked quickly to answer it. A minute later, my mother-in-law, Mrs. May, stepped in, wearing her usual stern expression. I believe Owen already explained everything to you, Lena, she said, her sharp eyes fixed on me. I stood there in the middle of my small kitchen, feeling a suffocating weight I couldn't shake. Owen stayed silent beside her. Do you have any objections? She continued, her tone daring me to challenge her. I was boiling inside, but I chose not to show it. Instead, I gave a faint smile and replied softly, masking the deep disappointment rising in me. No, of course not. I'd be happy to take care of Tessa. Mrs. May nodded, clearly satisfied. Good. We can enjoy our vacation knowing Tessa will be well looked after. Owen turned away clearly, avoiding my gaze. After his mother stepped outside to wait in the car, he came closer and whispered, I'm sorry, Lena. I didn't mean to put you in a tough spot, but everything's already been arranged. I looked up at him, hiding my emotions, and said quietly, Sounds like you made your decision before asking me, didn't you? Owen went quiet for a moment, then said, under his breath, I didn't have a choice. He walked out quickly, leaving me standing in the kitchen, surrounded by silence. I had done everything I could to please this family, and this was what I got in return. Indifference and decisions made without me. And yet, in that moment, I realized one thing. At least I wouldn't have to deal with Mrs. May's scrutiny for the next several days. That afternoon, I went to Owen's parents' house to see Tessa. She was sitting by the window, her eyes lighting up as soon as she saw me walk in. I sat down beside her and signed, gently. I'm going to stay here with you for a few days, okay? Tessa looked up suddenly, her big eyes blinking as she signed back. They left you behind again. I was startled. It was the first time she used the phrase left behind. But I nodded, not hiding the truth anymore. Yes, they went to Santorini. Tessa stared at me for a moment, then signed something that stopped me. Cold. We have plans too. They'll be surprised. I stared at her in disbelief. She just smiled, her eyes carrying a mysterious glint I'd never seen before. And that's when I realized maybe Tessa was the one who truly understood the secrets this family had been hiding, and what she was about to reveal would show me that being left behind this time might actually be the opportunity I never saw coming. The next morning, I opened the living room curtains at my in-law's house. Warm spring sunlight poured through the window, softening the space. The house was unusually quiet. Owen's family had left for the airport early that morning. No more Mrs. May's complaints. No more judgmental stares over how I swept the floor incorrectly. I made a cup of coffee and brought it into Tessa's room like I always did. She was lying on her side, gazing out the window at the lavender bush her mother had planted last year. I knocked softly and entered. I brought coffee. I used the vanilla blend you like. Tessa slowly turned her head. And what happened next flipped my entire world upside down. She pushed herself up to a seated position. I froze in place, eyes wide. It felt like someone had muted all sound in the room. My heart pounded so hard I thought I was dreaming. What are you doing? I stammered, unable to hide my shock. Tessa let out a soft laugh, then unbelievably spoke. Her voice was gentle yet firm. Calm down, don't freak out. I almost dropped the coffee cup. Tessa, you can talk. You can walk. She stepped out of bed, taking solid steps toward me. No trembling, no hesitation, completely steady. I never lost the ability to walk or talk, she said calmly. It was all an act, one I had to keep up for years to protect myself. I couldn't speak. Memories came, rushing back, pushing Tessa's wheelchair, comforting her after Mrs. May's scolding. Had all of it been fake? Why? I finally asked. Why would you do that? Tessa sat down in a chair and motioned for me to sit too. Then she began to speak, her voice clear and even. I'm Owen's half-sister. His dad had me with his first wife. My stepmother, Mrs. May, never saw me as part of the family. After my dad passed away, she gained full control. I was a burden, something she had to tolerate. When I had a high fever at 12, she didn't take me to the hospital in time, and she was the one who told neighbors I had brain damage. When I recovered, I chose to stay silent. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. You pretended all these years? Not forever. Just since I realized that the weaker I appeared, the less they paid attention, and the less attention, the more freedom I had. She smiled. You, though, you were the only one who saw me as a real person. Not a responsibility, not a burden. I sat there stunned. The pieces started to fall into place. I remembered her knowing looks every time Mrs. May lashed out at me. The quiet smiles, the subtle winks. All along, Tessa had been alert, watching, waiting. But why now? I asked. Why tell me this now? Tessa stood up, walked to the closet and pulled out a small suitcase. Because we're going on a trip, she said, her voice unusually upbeat. You didn't really think I'd sit around and watch them have fun in Santorini, did you? My jaw dropped. You're going to Santorini? She nodded firmly. Plane, tickets, hotel, everything's ready. And yes, you have a ticket too. Dad left me some money before he passed. I saved it. For the right moment. I shook my head, still stunned. Tessa looked at me more serious now than ever. Lena, you need to see who Owen and his mother really are. You deserve the truth. And trust me, Santorini is where everything changes. I looked into her eyes, no longer timid or passive. Standing before me was a strong woman who had stayed in the shadows long enough, waiting for just the right moment. I took a deep breath. Maybe for the first time in months, I felt chosen. Not to serve, not to please, but to finally rise up and face the truth. I smiled. If you're ready, then so am I. Let's go. Tessa nodded, her smile blooming. And just like that, the journey began. Not just to Santorini, but toward the truth behind the marriage I once believed was peaceful. The flight took off early in the morning just after sunrise. I sat beside Tessa in the wired economy cabin of a domestic airline, still feeling a little breathless. Everything had happened so fast. Just yesterday, I had quietly accepted my role as the one left behind, and now I was flying to Santorini with the sister-in-law everyone thought was helpless. Tessa wore a loose white shirt and simple jeans. Her hair was tied back, sunglasses on, looking like any confident young traveler. Every now and then, she turned to flash me a playful smile like we were winning a secret game only the two of us knew about. Still shocked? Tessa tilted her head as the flight attendant handed us drinks. I exhaled and shook my head slightly. Not shocked exactly, just, I never imagined things could turn around like this. Sometimes, she said, sipping her orange juice. It takes a shock to wake us up from a bad dream. I stayed quiet. She was right. I'd been living in a distorted dream for too long, believing in love, in family, in what I thought was real. After nearly 6 hours in the air, we landed at Santorini Airport under the blazing sun. Tessa hailed a taxi she had pre-booked, taking us to a luxury beachfront resort in Oia. Blue ocean, white sand, salty breeze. Santorini was breathtaking, but I hadn't come here to relax. At the front desk, everything had already been paid for in Tessa's name. She quickly handed me my room key and supply signed for me to stay quiet since staff were nearby. Once we got to I couldn't hold back anymore. Tessa, where did you get the money for all of this? I asked quietly. She took off her sunglasses, smiling with that same mysterious calm. Dad left it. For me. I kept it safe, untouched until it really mattered. But your plane ticket, the hotel, the taxi, all of that must have been really expensive. Dad told me to live for myself, and I feel like this is the moment. I nodded. my eyes fixed on the ocean outside the window. Where are we? Going to see them? Tessa pulled out her phone, opened a restaurant reservation app, and showed it to me. Tonight at 7 o'clock, Pisma poolside restaurant. His mom booked a table for 6 o'clock, just like their family tour schedule. And you're sure they don't know we're here? Positive. I booked us in the same resort but a different building. They won't run into us, unless we want them to. We spent the whole day resting in the room, snacking on fruit and crackers. Tessa suggested I try to forget everything for a while, but I couldn't stop thinking about what was coming. I felt like I was stepping into a grand play, except this time, I wasn't a passive audience member. I was the main character about to walk onto the stage. Around 6 o'clock, Tessa did her makeup lightly, tied her hair up, and put on an emerald silk jacket. I chose a long navy dress, simple but elegant. We both looked different, not like the women, underestimated back home, but like two people in control. On the way down to the restaurant, Tessa squeezed my hand. They're going to be shocked, but don't get too angry. Let them expose themselves. I nodded, my heart pounding. As we approached the poolside restaurant, we hid behind a palm tree. Tessa whispered. That's her. My stomach dropped. You mean she's the one Owen's been seeing? I saw messages from an unknown number on Mom's phone when she left the table. They called her the backup plan. I said nothing. My head was spinning. I looked back at the table where my husband was smiling brightly like I never even existed. He leaned in and whispered something to the woman, making her laugh hard in place, her hand gently on his shoulder. Tessa looked at me. Ready? I tightened my grip on her hand, a cold smile forming on my lips. Yeah, time for the real show to begin. We positioned ourselves behind a row of palm trees just a few steps from Owen's family table. Under the warm lights, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the air. My mother-in-law, Mrs. May, was raising her glass of wine, her face beaming. No trace of the cold, judgmental woman who had hurled so many criticisms at me. But what really stunned me was the sight of Owen sitting so close to that unfamiliar woman. She looked polished, young, confident, her hand resting casually on Owen's, like it belonged there. There wasn't a hint of guilt on his face, no sign that he had just left home, abandoning his wife to care for a sister, supposedly unable to walk. Not one check-in, not one look of regret. Tessa quietly slipped a small phone with an earpiece into my hand. I placed a recorder under their table before they arrived, she whispered. I'm sure they'll say something. You should hear. I slid the earpiece in, my hands going cold as their voices rang clearly in my. Lena has never been anything special, Mrs. May said sharply. Hasn't done a thing for this family. If you're divorcing her, at least. Owen's voice followed, low and firm. I'll say, she's emotionally neglectful. My lawyer says if we play it right, I won't have to give her a dime. I could even come out ahead. The girl next to you looks promising. Mrs. May chuckled. Compared to Lena, like gold next to rotting wood. I pulled the earpiece out, my lips pressed into a tight line. Tessa looked at me, not asking, just waiting. I nodded. We stepped out from the shadows and walked straight toward the table. I moved slowly, each step echoing against the wooden deck of the outdoor restaurant. Owen looked up first. The stunned look on his face nearly made me laugh. Mrs. May froze, her hands still midair, wine glass suspended. Good evening, I said, my voice strong and clear. Hope everyone's enjoying dinner. Lena, Owen, stammered. What are you doing here? Before I could reply, Tessa stepped forward. All eyes turned to her, and without saying a word, she calmly walked over to the table and pulled out a chair across from her stepmother. You're walking? Mrs. May could barely speak. I've been walking and talking just fine since last year, Tessa said, her voice soft but icy. You always like to see me as a burden. I just played along to help you live in that illusion. Silence fell over the table. The woman next to Owen quickly pulled her hand away, her face going pale. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recording, and hit play on speaker. If you're divorcing, or at least reclaim the assets. Mrs. May's voice. I'll say she's emotionally neglectful. Owen's voice. Other diners began to notice us. Curious stares turned toward our table. Owen shot up from his chair, his voice shaking. "What are you doing? Are you seriously trying to humiliate me? In public?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, each word sharp and clear, "You've been doing that to me for over a year, just not in public." Mrs. May snapped. "Lena, we can explain." "No need." I cut her off. "I've heard enough and I have the proof. I'll be speaking with my lawyer. As soon as I get back, this divorce won't be quiet." Owen rushed toward me, trying to grab my hand, but I stepped back and raised mine to stop him. "And you?" I said, my voice colder than ever. "You'd better be ready to face the consequences of your lies." The woman next to him stood up, clearly trying to leave, but Tessa called after her. "You might want to prepare to meet with a lawyer, too. I'm sure you know what you've gotten yourself into." Owen clenched his fists, his face burning with rage and shame. "You're ruining my life." I laughed, calm and unshaken. "You already did that yourself, Owen." I just pulled back the curtain. Then I turned and walked away with Tessa, leaving behind the soft lights, expensive wine, and a table full of lies. Owen ran after us, his footsteps pounding along the stone path. I didn't turn around, but Tessa glanced back at him, her eyes cold as ice. "Lena, you can't do this," Owen shouted, his voice cracking, no longer composed. "You're trying to destroy my life." I stopped walking, turned around, and looked straight into the eyes of the man who used to be my husband. "No, Owen, you did that to yourself. I'm just the one showing the truth. But if the company finds out, I could lose my job." His voice trembled, filled with fear. Standing next to me, Tessa crossed her arms and tilted her head, her tone full of sarcasm. "Oh, then maybe you should have thought about that before taking your mistress on vacation and trash-talking your wife while she was home, caring for your paralyzed sister." Owen turned to her, speechless in shock. I shook my head. "I didn't come here to cause a scene, but you and your mother pushed me past my limit. Now, you'll have to deal with the consequences." Right then, the restaurant manager arrived with 2 security staff. One of them spoke politely but firmly. "Excuse me, sir. You're disturbing the other guests. We're going to have to ask you to leave the dining area." Owen opened his mouth to protest, but when he saw the stares from nearby tables, he fell silent. He let the security team escort him out, looking like someone who had just caused a public scene. I stood still, watching until his figure disappeared behind the glass doors. As for Mrs. May, she didn't say a word the entire time. Her hand gripped her wine glass tightly as if letting go would shatter everything. When I walked away, she remained frozen. Her eyes weren't proud anymore, just hollow, like someone who had just lost all the control she once held. Tessa and I walked back to our room without speaking. We both knew things were only going to get more complicated, but a strange sense of relief flooded through me. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't stuck in a role someone else had cast me in. The next morning, I made a call back to the States and contacted a law firm recommended by an old college friend, though she no longer worked there. They arranged a meeting for me with an attorney named Marilyn Carter. Her voice was calm, steady, and firm. It gave me confidence from the very first minute. I told her everything. The cold marriage, the blatant betrayal, the voice recording, and how Owen took another woman on vacation while leaving me to care for Tessa. I didn't leave out a single detail. Marilyn nodded. "You're entitled to file for divorce with clear evidence of infidelity. And given your divorce of 5 husband's job status, we can also request post-divorce financial support. If that woman had a romantic relationship with him during the marriage, you can file a third-party interference claim against her as well." I paused, then said firmly, "I want to do everything legally possible to seek justice. We'll take care of the rest," Marilyn said with a reassuring smile. "And trust me, you're not alone in this." In the following weeks, everything moved quickly. My lawyer gathered solid evidence, hotel bills, photos, audio recordings, and messages Tessa helped retrieve from her stepmother's old phone. It was all added to the case file. A month later, I received the official notice. Owen was ordered not only to divide the marital assets, but also to pay spousal support for the next 3 years. On top of that, the other woman, Melleen Harper, was sued for alienation of affection with a civil compensation demand. When the first payment hit my account, I looked at the number on the screen and didn't feel triumphant. Instead, I felt like I'd fully reclaimed my voice, not because of the money, but because finally, no one else could define my worth. Tessa handed me a glass of non-alcoholic apple cider, her smile glowing. Congratulations, no one can ignore you anymore. We clinked glasses and the smile on my face felt as soft and steady as the ocean breeze that day. 3 months have passed since the court ruling and my life looks completely different now. The small apartment I once rented while living with Owen has been replaced by a top-floor unit overlooking a beautiful park in downtown Atlanta. I moved closer to my old college like I was hitting the reset button, but this time with a heart no longer afraid. I returned to the creative field, but now I work as an independent consultant. I choose the projects I enjoy, work with clients I respect, and most importantly, I have the power to say no to anyone who makes me feel unsafe. No more manipulation through fake words, belittling looks, or cold indifference like Owen and his mother once used on me. I still stay close with Tessa. After everything, we're not just former sisters-in-law. We're survivors, women who chose to rise instead of settle. Tessa moved in with a close friend in Asheville and finally started the graphic design course she'd always dreamed of. She once said, "You were the first person who believed in me enough for me to live honestly." I smiled. Her bravery had lit a fire in me, too. One quiet weekend afternoon, while I was tending to my balcony plants, the doorbell rang. I was a little surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I saw Owen and Mrs. May. Both of them looked nothing like I remembered. Gaunt, dark circles under their eyes, clothes worn out. Mrs. May no longer carried her powerful presence. "Lena," Owen spoke first, his voice thin and weak. "I know this is unexpected, but could you help us?" I stood, silent, not inviting them in, not saying a word. He went on. "I lost my job. After the lawsuit, they let me go without pay. Melleen, she left me when she found out I had nothing. And my dad, walked out on her. She's out of money. It's just us now." I looked at Mrs. May. She lowered her head. Something I don't think she'd ever done before. "Lena, I was wrong. So wrong. But I have no one else now. I just hope you can help us through this." The silence lingered. Only the wind rustled through the trees outside. I tilted my head slightly, then spoke. Slowly. "Funny. I once begged the two of you for just a little kindness. And now it's your turn. Lena, I know you hate me," Owen stammered. "But I've realized my mistakes. I truly have. Just a little help." I cut in. "I don't hate you, Owen. I just regret wasting so much time thinking. You were worth it." Mrs. May's eyes were red. "You can't be this heartless." I smiled softly. "I'm not heartless. I've just learned how to set boundaries. And mine is this. I won't go back to anyone who once disrespected, used, or betrayed me." I calmly closed the door before they could say another word. Before heading back inside, I walked to the corner of the balcony, opened the jar of sea salt I'd prepared earlier, and sprinkled it along the threshold. My own little ritual, a way to sweep away whatever darkness had once entered my life. I don't believe in superstition, but I do believe in symbols, and to me, that handful of salt was a clear declaration. The past no longer has a place in my present. Inside the apartment, the sunset was casting the western sky in a brilliant orange hue. I sat on the sofa, hugging the knitted pillow Tessa once gave me, and felt my heart completely at peace. Not all endings are perfect, but some endings are necessary. And for me, this wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the end of a life lived in silence, and the beginning of a life I chose for myself. From my own experience, I realized that sometimes strength isn't about holding on to a relationship. It's knowing when to let go. I was betrayed, dismissed, and left behind. But those very things helped me rediscover my worth. Life doesn't end when someone walks away from you. It truly begins when you decide to move forward for yourself. And I hope that anyone reading this finds the courage to choose their own happiness.